My name is Kate Quigley. I'm an economist with the Office for Coastal Management within NOAA. Today, I'm going to talk about equity considerations when doing a benefit cost analysis. First, what is a benefit cost analysis? A benefit cost analysis is an economic method where all benefits and all costs of a particular project are quantified in dollar values, and then net benefits are estimated. Net benefits are simply total benefits minus total costs. There are three outputs that you can get from a benefit cost analysis. The first is called net present value. That is an actual dollar value. It calculates as benefits minus costs with a discount rate applied. I'll talk about that a little more later. The second output from a benefit cost analysis is something called the benefit cost ratio, or benefits divided by costs. The third output from a benefit cost analysis is called return on investment, or ROI. This is a percentage. It is simply the benefit cost ratio times 100. So, when are benefit cost analyses used? Well, they are used in informal ways within our own households. For example, they are used to make household decisions. When we want to decide whether to accept a new job, to take a particular vacation, or to purchase a new car, or what car to purchase, we will very often tally in our minds all of the different benefits that can occur as a result of that option and the costs associated with it. Sometimes we even get out a spreadsheet to calculate those benefits and costs, but on day-to-day decisions, we typically don't do that. However, in development of military, healthcare, or other policy options, the United States does conduct benefit cost analyses, and they are actually required within economic impact statements. Some of the more popular benefit cost analyses that have been done include within healthcare, deciding which options to use for Affordable Care Act, as well as in deciding whether to require catalytic converters. Benefit cost analyses are also used in approval of federal funds for resilience and infrastructure projects. For example, FEMA requires a cost-effectiveness analysis study to be done in order to allocate federal funds. They require a benefit cost ratio of 1 or greater. EPA and DOT have their own versions of benefit cost analyses. Because so much is riding on a benefit cost analysis to yield a decision where benefits are greater than costs, the decisions made based on benefit cost analyses and the projects approved under use of benefit cost analyses reflect what we value in our society and what our future world looks like. So if we don't do a benefit cost analysis right, then there are lots of repercussions. So first, what benefits are quantified within a benefit cost analysis and how? Here's just a summary. However, there are many benefits that I have not included. These are some of the more common ones though. For example, when doing a benefit cost analysis, very often damages avoided from a particular infrastructure project will be tallied. Avoided replacement of essential services such as water filtration services, perhaps from restoration of a wetland. Very often trainings that are held, we will calculate the benefits of those trainings and the cost of those trainings, as well as volunteer hours. We will take a look at increased species populations and try to quantify a dollar value associated with those. Sometimes we will have new or increased ecosystem services that are more difficult to quantify, but there are methods to do so. For the DOT funds, very often lives saved or injuries avoided will be calculated, as well as time saved. So how are these benefits quantified? Well, economists have created a number of different methods to do this. Very often they will try to use market prices. So if you have a project that you're considering for revitalization of a beach, perhaps of some beach dunes, and this will perhaps result in more people going to the beach. Then what economists will likely do is take a look at some estimate of how many more people will be coming to the beach and multiply that by beach fees that are charged. If fish populations are going to be increased, then they will take a look at the price paid, the retail value price paid, or perhaps ex-vessel value paid to fishermen per pound of fish, and multiply it by some portion of the number of fish population that we expect to see increased. We can also take a look at decreased hospital bills, for example, if it has to do with a healthcare problem. Economists also very often will use a travel cost method, so they'll take a look at distance traveled to indicate how much value people place on the place that they're going or an excursion that they are taking. Economists will also take a look at time spent doing a particular activity, for example, volunteer hours, or a training that's attended, or time spent in a car to get to a particular location. They will do an analysis called an opportunity cost analysis using opportunity cost methods, where they will take a look at the wages that that person would have been paid if they were working, and that reflects the value that a person places upon taking that time off. There's also hedonic valuation, which takes a look at property value increases and the potential to do willingness to pay surveys. All of these, you don't need to know what all of these are, but all of these are simply estimates of proxies for value. Now, economists readily acknowledge that these are all proxies for values that are sometimes hard to get at. They acknowledge that some things simply can't be quantified, but should be instead described. Benefits and costs for some people may not resonate at all. That's simply not the framework of how they think about their world and think about a particular project. And benefit cost analysis should not be the sole decision-making tool. Economists know that there are also societal objectives and cultural objectives and other objectives that need to be taken into account that very often have equal footing with economics. So, when can inequities potentially occur within benefit cost analysis? Well, there's a lot of different opportunities, actually. We're going to take a look at some general ones. In particular, when all benefits and all costs can't be quantified and included in a benefit cost analysis, then you're going to have potential for inequities. For example, when cultural benefits such as increased well-being or spiritual benefits cannot be quantified and put into a benefit cost analysis, and anything other than quantification is not considered, then that population of people, those cultural benefits that they receive, will not be incorporated, and perhaps a project won't get approved. The same is true for social benefits such as increased social relations or increase in opportunities for community. So if these benefits are not being incorporated, then projects that supply an increase in cultural benefits or an increase in social benefits may not be approved, may not receive funding, and may not happen. In this sense, the BCA is disregarding benefits for certain populations of people, and those projects are not being done. That's a problem. That creates an inequity for projects that are approved and those aren't, and which populations receive those project approvals. A couple other ways that inequities can potentially creep into benefit cost analysis. When distributional effects are not examined within a benefit cost analysis or alongside a cost effectiveness analysis, then there's a problem. So for example, taking a look at damages avoided. Those damages avoided are based upon property values. So if you are perhaps building something that is going to result in damages avoided for high property values, then your benefits are pretty high. If it's going to avoid some sort of negative damages for low property values, then the benefits are going to be pretty low. And that results in a situation where projects protecting high value properties are going to get approved more often than projects that are protecting low property values. And that's when you can have inequities. Now, this can be resolved in a number of different ways. Either you can find a way to incorporate in benefit cost, these values into the benefit cost analysis, or you can recognize that distributional effect. So at least when people are taking a look at a benefit cost analysis, they can take that into account. Another way that inequities can potentially occur within a benefit cost analysis is when cumulative impacts are not examined. For example, when a particular population is again and again experiencing a situation where they have regulations imposed upon them. One regulation may not be a huge impact, but when you have 4 or 5 regulations in a row, year after year after year, you do have to take a look at the cumulative impacts. And this is something that is required in benefit cost analyses with regulatory actions. Another way that inequities can potentially occur in a benefit cost analysis is when an inappropriately high discount rate is applied to a benefit cost analysis. And this really has implications for intergenerational equity. So, for example, if you have a project where the benefits are not going to accrue or not going to show up until 15 to 20 years into the future, if you have a high discount rate, then those benefits will not show up in a benefit cost analysis, the way the calculations are done. If you have a lower discount rate, though, then you are looking out over a longer time horizon, and those benefits will be counted. So that's something that economists need to be quite conscious of. However, we do have situations where a particular discount rate is required to be used. And in those situations, then those projects that have benefits that accrue for future generations are not going to be counted. So these are big problems, and there are also problems with some of the methods that economists use. For example, willingness to pay. People who receive a lower income are going to have a lower willingness to pay, perhaps, for some beneficial project than people with a higher income. So there are all sorts of problems that economists have been talking about for the past 40 to 50 years and trying to find ways to address. So what do we do? Well, number one, we need to keep doing and improving benefit cost analyses. I don't think that, in my personal opinion, this is something that should be thrown out, but it's something that we need to be real conscious of and aware where inequities can occur, and do our best to incorporate new ways of thinking, explore new methods to include and present social and cultural values on equal footing with economic values. So if we're not able to incorporate those because we can't put a dollar value on them into a benefit cost analysis, that's okay, as long as we have some other way to convey those values. And we need to do that more and more often. And very often that's not done by economists because we need to educate ourselves about new ways of thinking about cultural valuation and social valuation. We also need to talk about the distributional effects. So if we know distributional effects are happening, we need to go ahead and address those, talk about them, and quantify them. And that's something that's being done more and more. We also need to encourage low discount rate usage when it's appropriate, when we have a project where the benefits are going to accrue over a longer time horizon than otherwise. That needs to be done, and that's just starting to be done right now. And perhaps most importantly, we need to encourage cross-discipline conversations and really get creative. So very often we have a situation where economists are not speaking to non-economist social scientists, or are not speaking to anthropologists, or not speaking to perhaps populations that really do think in a different way about social and cultural valuation. And most of all, we need to get creative and think about new ways to do things, new ways to present information, Once again, we realize that benefit cost analysis, as prominent as it has become, is not the only way to think about things, and can be thought about when you're thinking about economic objectives, but we can't quantify everything. So we also need to think about other objectives, social objectives and cultural objectives, and other economic benefits that actually can't be quantified. Thank you.